ready?
We're ready.
Okay, this is our second take. We're here today to introduce my granddaughter, Lily Rozelle, and my grandson, Eric Gault, to their great uncle, Hugo Black. Lily and Eric are both recent graduates from high school, and I hadn't really told them enough about family history, so I hope this will get their interest piqued a little bit. If you, later on, when you get through, you finish your education and work for a while, you get middle age, you start to wonder, you settle down, you got a little time, you wonder, where am I going? What's going to happen after this life? You start thinking about that, but you also start thinking about where'd we come from, my family. And lots of people get the genealogy bug. They get interested in family history, like I did. And we've had a lot. My Aunt Audrey was a genealogist for the family. My Aunt Sue was a genealogist for the other part of the family. And Verna Phillips, they were interested in family history. They saved it. They gave it to me. And then I've got filing cabinets full in there of family history that will be yours one day, yours and Eric's. Now, if you want to know Hugo's life in his words, this book, Mr. Justice and Ms. Black, the whole first part of this book is he writes a short autobiography in his own words. And so, you can't beat that. Also, very good, my daddy probably had 10 of these copies of this book, written by Hugo's son, Hugo Jr., Daddy's first cousin and friend. He wrote another very good, not scholarly, not dealing with the legal things as much, but a lot of family things. So that's great. But if you really want to get down in the weeds and know our family history, but how our family related to the broader county politics, county religion, state politics, then Steve Soot's book, I don't pronounce that right, is the best. This is one I always go to. I'll study family history and quit for a few years. If I want to go back, I read Steve's book. And he signed it for me here at the beginning. That's nice. But what's odd and really weird is that in the back of the book, there's another signature. It's signed by Governor John Patterson. Now, Governor Patterson, when you study your history, you'll find out, as far as winning the office of governor in Alabama by riding the racist ticket, he beat George Wallace running for governor by, talking about segregation and how awful integration was. And he just pounded the drums. Well, while he was governor, my daddy, Hugh Rozelle, was in the state legislature. And I was a page in Montgomery while he was governor. And so he writes to my friend, Huey Rozelle Jr., because he remembered Daddy. Now, in his defense, after he got out of politics, he could be his true self. And he wasn't really prejudiced at all. He was just doing it for the greater good. He wanted to get elected, and he did do things while he was in office that didn't have to do with race and politics and things. But I strongly recommend reading Steve's book, especially the first part. And I'm going to give you, speaking of the Civil Liberties Union, I've carried this little, since I was teaching, I've always had this little copy of the Constitution, American Civil Liberties Union, put that out for it so that everybody could have it, study the Constitution. Steve, started the Alabama branch of the American Civil Liberties. So I hereby present you, and I'll get one for Eric, with this Constitution. Always keep it close to you. And, look at it every once in a while when you hear these people arguing about the law and things. That's the law. And your uncle, Hugo, on the Supreme Court, he wasn't just a Supreme Court justice. He was a great Supreme Court justice, I think. And I'm going to try to show it to you how he is. Now, he had several brothers and sisters. His oldest brother, Robert Lee Black, followed in his daddy's footsteps, and he became a merchant in Alabama. And I've got a picture, R.L. Black's Mercantile, there on the square in Ashland. I'll show you where it is when we go there in a little while. And then the next sister was Aunt Ora, who was a school teacher, and she never had any children. So when Daisy and Edward, who lived here in Hatchet Creek, they wanted to move to Ashland so that their children could get a better education. And Aunt Ora moved out of her house and sold it to Edward and Daisy. So the house that Daddy grew up in had been Aunt Ora's house. And that column right over there was a column on the front porch of that house that was torn down. Well, it just fell in, and I shouldn't have let it fall in. So we got down to Aunt Ora. The next one is very interesting. Is Uncle Orlando, or Lander, the family called him. He was a doctor in Wilsonville. And when you go back today, or tomorrow, and you go through Wilsonville, you know, where you turn and go left, right where you turn at Wilsonville to turn on the road to go straight to Clinton, if you'll look to the right, there's a little row of brick buildings there. Well, there was a merchant named Densler who owned one of those very successful stores. And Densler had a daughter named Blossom, and a very cute, vivacious girl. Well, one day here comes a new doctor to town, a young doctor, an unmarried doctor. And so here's Blossom and here is Orlando. They fell in love, and they had one son, Densler. And Orlando is buried there. But Orlando died in his 50s. People in our family have, and they get cardiovascular disease, they have a stroke, and they die. Well, here's Orlando was working himself to death. He would, he'd ride a buggy out all times of the night to tend to people. Later on, he got a motorcycle, put his little black bag on a motorcycle. He's going all over Shelby County delivering babies and fixing broke arms and things. And later he got a car, and he really loved for his younger baby sister Daisy to come see him, because she would bring her husband Edward, and Edward would get up with him in the middle of the night and go with him out on all these things. Edward had a big time doing that. But anyway, finally Orlando died with cardiovascular disease, and Hugo, it scared him to death, because, dying that young, and he always was afraid of it. Well, he had every right to be, because his sister, anytime I say great grandma, put about 3 greats in front of it. Great grandmother, Daisy, she had a stroke within a year, so she had a heart attack and died. My daddy had a stroke within a year, he had a heart attack and died. And it's just in the family. So when you get a little older, get in your 40s, go have your cholesterol checked. Stay on top of that. Your daddy did it. When I told him about it, the next week he's down there, and they put him on a statin drug, which is, I'm glad of that. Okay, so we got to Orlando, the doctor who died young, worked himself to death. And the next one, my favorite, Ruth, if you'll swing around, is Pelham. Pelham was the smartest one in the family. When he took the bar exam, he was an attorney. When he took the bar exam, he made the highest grade that had ever been made on the bar exam in Alabama at that point, is our family tradition. And so he had a couple of thoughts, though. well, I guess they were faults. He drank too much, and he liked women a little too much, maybe. And I have letters here. After he was an attorney, he went to visit some Tolans in Texas, I think, and I went out to check on it to see if I could find any evidence of it. And the Tolan that was there was I think he was superintendent of education. So he goes out visiting. Well, he meets a lot of ladies. I've got the letters here. One of the letters that I always remember is she said, Pella, come see me tonight at 10 o'clock. Bring beer. So he was a player, and but it ended up killing him. He's a very young man. He went to see his cousin, Tolans, who were living in Oxford. I think he's an uncle. And then he went to Talladega to see some ladies. And he was drinking and seeing these ladies. Well, it's time to go home, and he and his horse and buggy take off in the middle of the night from Talladega, and he's headed back to Ashland. Well, he gets down to, I think it's Pliers Mill, and he's asleep, and the horse and the wagon and Pelham go off in the mill pond, and Pelham drowns and the horse drowns. And so, that shows you what you get into. But now, Aunt Audrey had a different theory. She went and checked, and she talked to some people who live very close to the mill. And they said that night they heard loud shouting and voices down at the mill pond. This is Aunt Audrey checked this. And so it was a theory in our family and around the community that, Pelham been visiting these ladies all around, and that some father, some brother, or maybe some husband or some, boyfriend killed him. We don't know. But I imagine the sheriff of Talladega checked it out and, got to the bottom of it. Okay, then I think it's Daisy. And then this is Uncle Vernon. He had a tragic story. He died of diphtheria. He was real smart. He could make speeches almost as good. He would have won every speech he made if it hadn't been for his big brother. And there's stories about how he tried to throw one so his little brother could win. But he died of, I think it was diphtheria, when he was like 14, 15, 16 years old. And his name, in a lot of these books, they say his name is Merritt Black. But it was Merritt Vernon Black, and the family called him Vernon. But the interesting part is that Merritt, their mother's name was Ardella Tola. And she had an uncle who was the richest man in East Central Alabama, Merritt Street. So they named Merritt Vernon after her favorite uncle. And just to tell a quick story, I'll tell it to you in a little more detail later. But Merritt Street, if it hadn't have been for Merritt Street, who owned this huge store, owned thousands of acres of land, sold the first car sold in Clay County. When Claude Pepper's daddy wanted to buy him school books, he had to walk all the way from Millerville over to the store to buy his school books. It was the hub. It was the store. And but he subsidized. Our grandpa, Fed Black, was down there farming. And Adela's uncle, Merritt Street, gave him enough money to start a little store. He appointed him, gave him the money to put up a bond to be the justice of the peace, which made you a little money. And then he helped subsidize when they all moved to Ashland from the Harlan community, and he bought half of Manning's store, which was the biggest store in Ashland at the time, and with money helped by, or signed, by his wife's uncle, Merritt Street. And so he never would they never would have got the education they got if it hadn't been for Merritt Street. And then his daddy, Hezekiah Street, is our ancestor, and I've been to Halifax, Virginia, to see where they all came from. So this genealogy will carry you all over the country if you're not careful. All right, don't want to get too far off. Then there's a little sister, Della, and she died when she was like 2 or 3 years old, and she just died a few days before Hugo was born. And so that kind of helped Della get over this little Della, or baby Della, and by Hugo being born. Okay, that's all the family, I think. I'm sure I've left a lot out. Now, there was a Tolan in the family who was like a cabinet maker. He was like your mom. He could build furniture. And he built a bed that I have a picture of in here that my grandmother had, your great-grandma Daisy had. And Hugo wanted that bed. He moved to Washington. Well, he had helped Daddy get a job during the Depression running an elevator in Washington, and then he had gotten Albert Lee a job with the Capitol Police later on in Washington during the Depression when jobs were hard to find. And so, well, there's a picture in here somewhere. So he wanted that bed. Well, Grandma Rozelle, Daisy, says, well, he's done so much for the family. She boxed the bed up and sends it to Hugo along with a counterplane or something, kind of a bedspread kind of thing. And she sent that to Hugo, so his family has that now. But there was the black dining table that this Tolan had built. And when Daisy died, Aunt Audrey got it. Now then, my cousin Diane, one of the sweetest humans on earth, she has it in Birmingham. And when we won't say die, we'll say when she don't want it anymore, she's leaving that to us that you'll have. You'll have this historic dining room table. Well, you got a problem. This table belonged to my Yarborough family. You'll have this table. This is historic. And Ruth and I, when we first got married, we had a little oak table, and that matches that buffet down there. And you're probably gonna have that table, plus the table your mama had built. What you gonna do? You got a lot of dining room. You're gonna have to have tables in every room. But don't get rid of that. Either way, any of these, do something with them. Down in the storage, there's a trunk down there, and if you look, it's just a square trunk. If you look on it, it says Hugo Black on it. That trunk Hugo used to ship when he was elected to the Senate and probably Supreme Court. His possessions in Birmingham and down here, they'd put it in that trunk, put it on train, and send it to Birmingham. So we have Hugo Black's trunk down there. Down at Orange Beach, you know that old radio, the kind of clock radio on the side of my bed? That was Hugo Black's clock. And I like to think that that clock woke him up so that he could get to the Supreme Court to write some of these decisions that we're going to talk about in a second. They're very important to American history. So that clock's important. Don't just throw that in the trash when I die. Okay. Now, that picture right there, cameraman, of George Washington. That picture hung in Hugo Black's Senate office building when he first went to Washington. And then when I got a hold to it, I hung it over my desk for my teaching career. So it hung over my desk for years and years, which is not nearly as important as it hung in Hugo Black's. See, all right, follow me. Lights kind of dim in here. Our cameraman, I guess, will be here eventually. Cameraman, come on. this picture here, just come on over here where you can kind of see it. This is Hugo Black. Hugo Black was one of FDR. My daddy had this picture. FDR's new dealers, one of the important new dealers, and a lot of the New Deal programs Hugo Black had a part of, and this is a picture of him, New Deal leaders. And Hugo, on the far right up there. And then over here, I kind of wish I'd made my bed now. This map, when Hugo Black got the genealogy bug, he got with a bunch of cousins, and they went to South Carolina to see where the Tolans had come from. And this is a historic map showing Lawrence County. And if you look on the back, here's from the bookstore, Mr. Justice Black would like you to send him map number 347, which is that map. And so Hugo had this map hanging up in his office too. And I'll tell you how I got a hold to it a little bit later. But that's an important family artifact. Okay. I guess I can edit these little parts out, these lags. Let's see where we are now. Oh Lord, where's my yellow pad? I'm lost.
Did you take it in there with you?
Probably did. Okay, I left my brain. Where's my? I'll edit this out. There it is. Okay, here's my notes. So those are the artifacts. Now, when I graduated from high school, Ruth, your grandma, and my mother and daddy and I went on a vacation. And we went, as part of the trip, we went to Washington. And we were walking around looking at Washington, and there's a Supreme Court building. So we just walk up there, and Daddy goes in and says, if Hugo's not busy, Justice Black's not busy, I'm his nephew, and we'd like to see him. Well, a little bit later, lady comes back, goes sits us down in the office. Pretty soon, here comes Hugo Black in there. And we sat and chat a little bit. I have to say, he was interested in Daddy a little bit. He was interested in Mama. He's interested in me. But Ruth at that time was this like 18-year-old, blonde, sexy-looking blonde. And so he had them sparkling blue eyes. He was really, where are you from? Where are you? He was really interested in her. Well, when I got home, I was graduating from high school, and he sent me this Plato's Republic, to Eddie Rozelle, with love, Uncle Hugo, 1966, Plato's Republic. And he said, you probably won't have time to read the whole book now, but I want you to read the part about the shadows and in the cave. And so sometimes you'll hear about it in your college education. Plato's, Hugo Black says that's important, that sometimes you think you're seeing life, but all you're seeing is the shadows of life. And you'll have that. Don't throw it in the trash. Now here's another story. When I was at the University of South Alabama in Mobile, I was taking a political science class. And so one day I go in, and there's a fishbowl on the professor's desk with a bunch of little white papers. And he said, all right, one at a time, I want you to come up, reach in the fishbowl, pull out a piece of paper, and that's the topic of your paper. It's research paper. Big deal. So I go reach in there, and I pull it out, open it up. Hugo Black, liberal or conservative. I thought, boom, all right. So I rush home to Hillsdale Heights. I write a letter quickly. Uncle Hugo, I've been assigned this topic. If there's any way you could help me with how you would see this, please let me know. And there's a matter of urgency to this because the paper's due like in 3 weeks. So I run to the post office, put it in the mail. Well, within just days, here's a letter from the Supreme Court. And Hugo Black, in his own words, it's typed up. He apologized for it being typed. But he said to the effect, I don't see myself as either a liberal or conservative. I see myself as a constitutionalist. And so I take that, and everybody else is writing these 7, 10, 12-page papers. I write a page and a half. Because, hell, I got here it is right here. And I had that in. Well, the next Monday morning, after they'd been graded, the professor's standing up, and when everybody comes in, Eddie Rozelle. He didn't know who I was. I'm Eddie Rozelle. He said, is this authentic? Is Hugo Black your uncle? I said, yes, sir. And he said, this letter, this is actually authentic. This is from Hugo Black. And I said, yes, sir. He said, well, you sent it? And I said, well, no, I better keep it. He said, well, you think about it. He said, I'll pay you what he wanted that letter real bad. And that letter is in the safety deposit box. It's been mentioned in one of the biographies of Hugo. And so that's kind of an important family artifact to keep. Okay, let's talk, in addition to this column that was on your Grandma Daisy's house, down in storage, there's a mantelpiece, beautiful mantelpiece with a mirror in it, and that'll be yours. If you ever build a house and you want to have some family history in there, you can take that mantelpiece, if you have a fireplace, and put it up, clean it up, put it up, and build you a little fireplace or gas logs or something like that. But that would be a pretty interesting, just something there of interest in your house. Now, let's talk about Hugo Black's career. Now, I'm trying to talk fast. Hugo first went to medical school. He went to medical school for a year. He did 2 years worth of work in medical school in 1 year. But somewhere between dissecting bodies and blood and gore and things, he lost his interest in being a lawyer. In being a doctor like his brother, Orlando, that he idolized. And so he decided, instead of going to medical school in Birmingham, he went to Tuscaloosa and went to law school like his brother, Pelham. And so he had some good luck. He opened up practice in Ashland. He was there a year, and he had a wonderful stroke of luck. His office burned down. And so he closed the office and he moved to Birmingham. Thank goodness. Well, he got out, and he's a good politician like my daddy, or my daddy's a good politician like him. And he got well known, started getting some cases, and he ended up running he was the district attorney of Jefferson County. They called it the solicitor or something, but he was the district attorney. And he saw all these cases where people were taken off the streets by the sheriff and put in jail and rented out and things like that. He saw all that happening, didn't like it. And so if he'd done nothing other than that, we'd be talking about him right now. District attorney of Jefferson County, that's kind of a big deal. Well, later on, he has bigger political aspirations, and he runs for the United States Senate and wins. And he's one of FDR's new dealers. And his Senate career is notable for what he's always for the little guy, always for the mine worker. That the black mine worker ought to make as much as the white mine worker. He's one of us. And then, of course, he goes to the Supreme Court. All right, now let's sit down. There's a few of his decisions we'll go over real quickly that I am really proud of. One of them is if before this decision, if a person was arrested, they would drag him before the judge. The district attorney would say what he did wrong. If he was a poor guy, he's going to be in jail. Well, this case comes before the Supreme Court, and Hugo wrote the majority decision saying that everybody, no matter how much money they have right to counsel. They have the right to, and you've heard that, you know, you have a right to remain silent. And also the Miranda Act. He didn't write that act, but he was a big part of it. And you'll hear it on these TV shows when they read them, their Miranda rights. And so I'm real proud that he thought that everybody, no matter how poor they are, deserve an attorney when they get in trouble.
So before this, people didn't have access to a public defender?
No, there wasn't a public defender.
Wow.
If they had the money, they could hire a lawyer. But if they didn't have the money, you know, you got the judge, you got the guy that arrests you, and you've got the prosecutor. And you sitting in there and don't tell what's going to happen to you. Now, the next one is really weird. Hugo Black was approved. He didn't, you know, like when Daddy was up there, Daddy might have been drinking, Hugo kind of keep an eye on him. He was very prudish. He taught Sunday school in Birmingham. They said his Sunday school classes sometimes had more people attending the Sunday school classes than the preacher had when he preached the sermon. He was, you know, a real straight arrow. He didn't believe in any of this kind of stuff. Well, here's Hugo Black writing in dissent that you can't have laws against pornography and obscenity. The whole country's trying to we're not going to have any of that obscenity. Well, Hugo Black said, well, if you can tell a person what he can look at and what he can read, then you can tell him what he can look at and what he can read. That's taking away his individual freedoms. Because can you tell him that he can't read, you know, the Old Testament of the Bible? Can you tell him he can't, you know, it's bigger than just obscenity, is the way he saw it. And there's on the internet, there's YouTube, there's where he explains that a lot better than I did. Now, the one that I'm most proud of, his decision that I'm most proud of, is separation of church and state. All these old philosophers that I love, the Enlightenment philosophers like John Locke and Rousseau and Montesquieu, you'll learn about them later, Diderot, all of those guys. My favorite was Voltaire. And you ever get a chance, he wrote a lot of good stuff, and he had a way with words and everything. But they all agreed and wrote about and dissected the idea that government and religion should be kept apart. Well, Jefferson and Madison, they were reading these guys, and they agreed that separation of church and state. And so I think you did a paper on this, didn't you? Or gave a speech on it? Yeah. So Jefferson was for it because he wanted to keep religion out of government. Madison was for it because he wanted to keep government out of religion. You know, can the government tell preachers, you got to spend 10% of your time saying why Jesus wants this bill passed? You know, that's what they were trying to guard against. And so he wrote the prayer decision. Now, if you ever hear somebody talking about, I'll tell you one thing, they put religion out of schools, that's what ruined this country. Just don't even try to talk to them, because words don't cure dumb. They won't understand it. But here's an example of a prayer. And you don't have to close your eyes. This is a mock prayer. Okay, I'm praying now. Our dear Heavenly Father, we come to you today to thank you for the many blessings that you have bestowed on your country, your chosen country, the United States of America. And we want to thank you, oh Lord, for sending your disciple here to guide us and protect us through these hard times. Our President, Hillary Clinton, who is your choice, Donald Trump, Obama, fill in the blank, who is your choice that you have sent to guide us. And we promise you, oh Lord, that if we should ever hear anyone speaking disparagingly of you, oh Lord, Jesus, or Donald Trump, we will call the 1-800-JESUS hotline, and we will report that person, even if it's our parents, our teacher, or anybody in the community. That's what they didn't want. And if you put prayer in schools, that's what you're going to end up with. And if you don't believe it, read history or kind of watch what's happening in the news now. And also, let's just say, all right, we're not going to have a federal government prayer. We're going to leave it up to the communities. Okay, if you were to move to southern Louisiana and you sent your kids to a school, it's going to be a Catholic prayer. Hail Mary, full of grace. Not that there's anything wrong with it, but that's what the school board and everything, they would think that's what's appropriate. If you lived in San Francisco and a few districts, it might be a Buddhist prayer. And even in Dearborn, Michigan, there's a district that's predominantly Muslim. Are you going to send your kids to listen to a Muslim prayer? Not that there's anything wrong with it, but, that's the reason you got to have separation of church and state, keep prayer out of school, because it's too messy. But don't try to explain that to anybody. Just let them believe what they want to believe. Now, he had a couple of bad decisions. One bad decision and maybe a bad decision. He wrote the Internment Act during World War II. He wrote the decision that allowed the Japanese citizens, all these citizens, could be put into camps, no matter if one of them might be a spy. And I cannot see how he wrote that, and that kind of makes me sad that he wrote it. And I even wrote one of my little books, Sins of the Few, deals with that like while there's just small group of Wahhabi and Salafi Sunni Muslims who Al-Qaeda and ISIS and all those bad guys, that's just a small group. But a lot of people hate all of Islam because that small group. Well, Hugo says it's all right to lock up all Japanese because one or two of them might be a spy or saboteur, something like that. Now, okay, I gotta hurry. But KKK, you ever say anything about your Hugo Black's niece, they're gonna say KKK. And he did join the KKK. And let me tell you why. It's the greater good. My daddy, Hugh Rozelle, when he graduated from law school, he's going to come to Alabama, and he's going to practice law for a few years, and then he's going to run for Congress. Thanks goodness that didn't happen, but that happened right during the 54 decision, which is Brown versus Board of Education. And so Hugo Black's name was moved. They say, you're not running for anything. There was a thing called the White Citizens Council. And all over the South, you couldn't run for anything without permission of the White Citizens Council, who control the Democratic Executive Committees. So they told Daddy, if you're going to run for anything, you got to go on the radio and you got to denounce Hugo Black. Of course, Daddy wasn't going to do that. But then they had this letter where the letter said, I am opposed to integration, and it's wrong, and it was a bad letter to have to sign. Daddy never said if he signed it or not, but I think he did, because he had this idea: if I can get elected to the state legislature, I'm gonna do good. I'm gonna help black people. I'm gonna do good. So he did a bad thing for a greater good to get into office to do good. Now, whether that's right or wrong, some of those philosophers say, no, you can't do that wrong thing for a greater good. Well, Hugo Black joining the Ku Klux Klan in the 1920s, the Klan was really growing. It was all over the country. And they had decided that they didn't just hate black people, they hated Catholics, they hated Jews, they hated Freemasons, immigrants, you hated everybody, and there were people all over the South. It was growing. So Hugo, in order to run for Senate and do a greater good, which he did do a lot of greater good, he joined the KKK. Now, within a year, he quit, turned his card in, and you'll have people try to say, no, he really believed that. They'll take some of his words out of cases he did and think. But today we're going to read what Hugo Black wrote some of his words at the monument in Ashland that will be there in a few minutes. And the person that wrote those words could not be prejudiced. Of all his decisions, it's the 1954 Brown versus Board Education. That's what ruined him. That's what, he couldn't even come back to Alabama. They hated him in Alabama. And I'm going to tell you how that affected our family and my daddy and everything when we get up to the library. But people in the South hated Hugo Black. He had to sneak in when he'd come to visit, go to family reunions. Because there'd been somebody trying to kill him. Okay, we are stopping part one. We are journeying and we're going to Ashland.